Let's get a new start now to our holistic health. We have discussed nutrition, exercise, water, sunlight. Now let's get into the topic for our first T of New Start, and that is temperance. In American history, we have a lot of important, pivotal women who have played a vital role in the development of our great nation. One of them being a lady by the name of Carrie Nation. Come on, be honest. Have you ever heard of Carrie Nation? And her name was pretty fitting because she desired to carry the nation. She believed that the nation was heading away from God, that the culture was turning from God and accepting more and more secular ideas and becoming more and more wicked in their practices. And so she believed that one of the main things that caused this was the use of alcohol. So Carrie Nation in Kansas believed that she had received a vision from God and started gathering members of her community who also wanted to rid our nation of alcohol. And they went around stoning buildings, saloons, bars around Kansas. Now, the prohibition of alcohol actually came after her day, of course, about a decade after her death. But she played a pivotal role in trying to bring about a temperance movement in the United States to prohibit the use and the sale of alcohol. So when we think of the word temperance, many times we think of prohibition. We think of complete abstention from anything that might be viewed as unhealthy. Temperance, while it does include things we need to stay away from completely, it also includes the things that maybe we need to use in moderation. So I've heard the term used for both, for moderation. I've heard it used for prohibition, and it actually stands for both ideas. True temperance seeks to feed upon those things which are good for our holistic health. And it seeks to get rid or control is actually a good word, to control the things that damage or hinder our holistic health. So let's look at a verse in Philippians chapter 4, verse 8. Paul says this in his encouragement to the believers in Philippi. Finally, brethren, whatever things are true, whatever things are noble, whatever things are just, whatever things are pure, whatever things are lovely, whatever things are of good report. If there is any virtue and if there is anything praiseworthy, meditate on these things. Now, I know it's not a popular topic, especially in our culture today, but the Bible does define that there are things that are good. Then it also defines things that are not good. This is a pivotal, important role for the Scriptures in our lives. It is to correct us. It is to lead us. It is to guide us on the path of not just salvation, though that's the big path we want to be on, but it also guides our path of holistic health. There are things that are good for us. There are things that are not good for us. And the world has offered us many things that we should use sparingly, that we should be in control of, rather than having them control us. So let's discuss temperance with our physical health, our bodies. One thing, I could go into a whole sermon, I'm sure, on any of these topics and just keep you for a long time. I'm trying to pinpoint one important topic for each part of our holistic health. So one thing I want to discuss with our temperance for our body is salt. Now, you know what salt does for blood pressure, and many of us understand that it's not great for our blood pressure, and usually when you want to lower your blood pressure, you lower your intake of salts. But salt does more than just that. Salt can also block the absorption of calcium into the body. What's high in salt? You've got processed foods, of course, are very high in salt. You've got deli meats, you've got canned foods, canned soups. When it comes to meats, you've got the bacons, and you've got the spams, and you've got the hams and things. But also, any vegetarians out there, you've got veggie meats. Many veggie meats are very high in salt. Now, am I saying salt is on the red light list? No, but we should be in control of our salt. Now, why bring up salt? Because salt is one of those things that can control us, right? When we are craving certain types of food, typically, when we're craving food, it's one of three things: something sweet, something salty, and at least in my case, the third one is something cheesy. We seem to crave those three types of foods. We can craving them is no issue. Having them is no issue at times. But letting them control us, like deciding what I want because I have a craving repeatedly, can be very unhealthy for us. So obviously you want strong bones. I've got bad knees. I know what it's like having bones that ache, joints that ache. Cutting down on the salt will help the calcium in your body be absorbed by your body a little easier. Other things that actually stop or slow or hinder the absorption of calcium into your bones is caffeine. Now, bear with me for a moment. I'm not going to go into an old-time rant about caffeine, but let's think about this genuinely. I think Adventists traditionally, for those of you who are Adventists traditionally were no caffeine, no caffeine, no caffeine. At somewhere along the line, it became, well, use it in moderation. Now, typically in Adventism, no one even talks about caffeine very much anymore. And for a lot of people, Adventists and non-Adventists, caffeine has become a green light. Now, I'm using this terminology, I'm hoping you remember from our nutrition discussion. Green light means things we should have lots of. Yellow light are things that we should be in control of and have in moderation. And then red light items are things we should never have. At the very least, I think all of us should agree that caffeine should not be a green light. That it's not something that we should feel we have to have every single day. Also in that term of calcium is that caffeine slows. I think it was for every 100 milligrams of caffeine in a day, it blocks 6 to 10 milligrams of calcium from being absorbed in your body. In other words, you flush that right out in urine, that calcium. Well, we need calcium. That is a need. That is a green light thing. We need calcium. We want the right kinds of calcium, but we need calcium. We don't need caffeine. I'm sure people will want to debate that with me. But if I had to choose between calcium or caffeine, the right decision, the holistic decision, is to choose the calcium, right? So we want to be careful, at least yellow light, sodas, teas, and coffees. Whatever we decide to eat or drink, it should fit into this idea of Philippians chapter 4, right? Things that are good, if there's any virtue in them, things that are good is what we should be meditating upon. Now, we'll talk about our mind in a moment, but our body meditates on things, and that's in the digestive process, right? It meditates upon that food. It works and processes that food, and we want to have good, holy things, or good, healthy things in there. So we want to be careful with our physical bodies and that idea of temperance. How about our mind? Well, what blocks your mental capabilities? For me, the number one thing that blocks my mental capability is stress. Overthinking, over-worrying, replaying the past, replaying, this is what I should have done, this is what I should have said, this is how I should have said it. That's what keeps me up at night many nights, and we'll talk about rest later. But what blocks our mental capabilities many times is stress. And we have a lot of reasons for stress in this life. I mean, life is full of reasons to stress, right? From anything and everything. So, be temperate. Yes, there is stress. I mean, you can't red light stress. You can't just say, nope, no stress in my life. You could, but good luck. It's not going to work, right? It's going to come. Now, sometimes we cause the stress in our lives. Sometimes other people cause the stress in our lives. But nonetheless, stress is a part of our world. So we've got to try to temper it, not let it control us. So rather than allowing stressful thoughts to control you, we have to let them go. Now, how do you let them go? Well, Peter tells us to cast our cares upon God, for he cares for us. We have to believe and trust that God wants to take our stress and that he desires to give us a peace and a joy. And that's why we're discussing New Start, right? We're discussing the tools we want, the tools that we are given by God to use to be fully equipped for this peace and joy from heaven. And having a holistic health is a big part of that. So the next time you want to think about your stress and debate the stress, leave it to God. Pray about it. Talk to him about it. If you're going to talk about it, talk to him about it rather than talking to yourself about it. It doesn't really help, does it? It doesn't help me. Something I really need to pay attention to. You don't need to carry your stress. Let it go. Give it to him and trust that he will work things out. How about in our spiritual life? Something that we have to make sure that we control and not let it control us is time. There is, let me cast away the big lie of the day. There is time for God in your life. There is time for prayer time. There is time for Bible study. There is time for witnessing. There is time to go to church at least several times a month, if not every single time, every single week. There is time to go to prayer meeting. There is time to go to Bible study. I don't care how busy you are, there is time. Here's one illustration that I always think about when it comes to midweek Bible study. People tell me, "Oh, I don't have time." Well, I don't have time, and I don't get to just show up. The pastors don't get to just show up. We have to actually be prepared for it, right? To have a lesson, to teach something. And so we don't have the time either, but we're there, and we have to have the effort to be there with something substantial for people to learn. Trust me, there is time for these things. We have to take control of our time. Because when time controls us, many times the devil is attacking our spiritual walk. He's trying to separate us from those disciplines that God has given us to keep us in tune with him, to grow and to mature and to be sanctified through Jesus Christ. So take control of the time in your life. Sometimes that means saying no. Sometimes that means saying wait. Sometimes that means saying maybe someday. I'll try my best, right? We have to take control of our time, to be in charge of it, to plan our week out. And I realize, trust me, I know how many times I've gone to my office in the morning with, let's say, 3 very important things to do, and by the end of the day, I haven't touched any of the 3 because life has thrown all kinds of things at me. That's okay. We've got to take control of our time. Do our best, right? Be careful with your time. Be careful with what you're doing. Netflix and chill? Fine. Do it in moderation. Spend a little time if you want relaxing, resting in that way, but make time for God. Life will not provide you the time for God. You have to decide to make that time for him. And then our last part of our holistic health is our emotional side. Well, what is harming your joy? What is out to hinder or to slow or to control your joy? Well, that's going to be different for each and every one of us, but the Bible gives us an important principle about our joy, about our well-being, our emotional well-being. Right here in that same chapter that we just read from, Philippians chapter 4. Rejoice in the Lord always, and again, I say rejoice. When we prioritize our priorities, when we set our priorities in the right order, when God is number one in our lives, you're going to find a difference in your emotional health, your well-being. I understand we've had that conversation already, but in case anyone missed the first parts, I understand that there are chemical imbalances and there's other things that also lead to depression, that also lead to down times and a dark cloud over our heads. I experience those, I understand it, and sometimes it's natural. But We've got to be able to control our priorities, to put God number one, and we will see a difference. Maybe not a complete healing of depression or of stress, but we will see a difference in how we carry them. We will see a difference in how we deal with them. Put God first. Find your joy in Him. Rejoice in the Lord always, because Jesus is coming soon.